I'm very, very excited for all the presentations today, but these next two are really, really impactful and unique, not even within the state of Indiana. In some ways, this is national model stuff, and we have it right here in Central Indiana. So I'm thrilled that Doug Brenneke can meet with us today and share this story. Some of you may have seen parts of this before. It's starting to get out into the media, but we wanted to really get your ear today and have this conversation. Doug is currently the Vice President of Cable Research and Development at Belden and has held that position since 2008. He's worked at Belden for over 29 years in the Belden Engineering Center in Richmond, so longtime community member, and has started as a product design engineer in 1989. He graduated from the University of Iowa with a Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering. Doug and his wife Stacy have resided in Richmond his entire career and have 4 children ranging from 16 to 20. Oh my gosh.
Hence the gray hair.
I have 3 teenagers, and it's good for my prayer life, let's just say that. So I'm excited that Doug can be here to walk us through both of these presentations. These are also in your packet, but please engage and ask questions, and welcome Doug with me for this presentation.
Thank you very much, Kim, and a pleasure to be here. I've been on the flip side before. I know what it takes to put together an event like this, and it's much like a wedding. So hats off to Kim and her entire staff for pulling this together, because it's a lot of work. So let's give them a round of applause here. So I reflected on our partnership with Ivy Tech, and it started about 2 years ago to the day. Val and I started having a conversation, and it evolved from there. But if you take away one thing from today, I would take away that if you have workforce challenges in your business, if you have not taken the time to have a conversation with the folks at Ivy Tech, please do so, because they are a fantastic group, not only for putting together events like this, but they are great at coming up with creative solutions to workforce challenges. So please, if you have not reached out to Ivy Tech, take that initiative and reach out to somebody. It may not be the right person, but they will get you in contact with the right person. So when we started the conversation with Ivy Tech about 2 years ago, it was Val was doing her job, and Val's she's a pretty tough customer. So Val was looking for a commitment from Belden for the foundation. And so I listened to the pitch, and I said, Val, one thing that's got to come out of this, if we make this commitment, it has to be a win for Ivy Tech. It's got to be a win for the community, and it's got to be a win for Belden. And I'm pleased to say that in all the things I'll talk about today, that is indeed the case. And so I applaud Val and the team for, number one, reaching out, but secondarily, pulling together a great program for us, and actually 2 great programs. So I was a little conflicted this morning. Kim can be pretty prescriptive in her direction, if you know Kim, and so she had business casual on there. And so it's like, well, I'm not going to cross Kim, but I know Chad Bolzer is going to have a sports coat. So I did bring a sport coat. It's sitting down there, but I feel more comfortable in the business casual approach. The other question you might ask is, what does an electrical engineer, a research and development guy, know about workforce development? And the answer is not much. But the folks on my team know that I've been in this community a long time, have established some relationships, and counted on me basically to reach out to a lot of you to help make these programs become a reality. So I am not an expert in much of this, but what I am qualified to do is reach out to folks and work on process improvements, because we do that as part of product development, and it's branched out into workforce development. So when we met a couple years ago, we were talking about some of the issues we had in the workplace. And this is not a Belden slide. This was a slide that came back from Ivy Tech and the team. And Do these issues look familiar to anybody in the room out there? Yeah. So anybody that is out trying to hire new talent faces a lot or all of these issues. And it's statewide, it's probably nationwide, and how do we solve some of these challenging problems that we face trying to take our businesses into the next generation? And they're not easy. As Chad pointed out, there's no silver bullet to any of these issues, but it takes a community of folks like this to institute change. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'll give you a little overview of Belden because we are a little bit different company than your grandfather's Belden, so we've changed a little bit over the years. Talk about our workforce training program. Again, a partnership with Ivy Tech and others, so I'll go into the details of that. And finally, our newest initiative, the Pathways to Employment program. So one that we're very excited about also, and I'm sure we'll garner some interest and questions as we go through it. So what is Belden? So we've been around a little while, founded in 1902 in Chicago. So we've been around a while. We actually located in Richmond in 1928, so we're not quite at 100 years, but we're getting close. Oh boy, we got software changes required here. I'm not sure what that's all about. Okay. And so we have been in the community a long time. And the requirement at that point for Joseph Belden, who founded us, was he wanted a location that had a good, skilled workforce, number one, but it had to be a one-day rail from Chicago. So that was how we ended up in Richmond, Indiana, of all places. So we are a fairly large company now, $2.4 billion in revenue last year. We've got over 8,000 employees globally, with 700 in the Richmond and Wayne County area. So it's a very important strategic location for us and will continue to be so into the future. So let's dive in a little bit deeper and talk about the area and specifically our manufacturing facility. So we have 3 facilities in Richmond. We've got our manufacturing facility, we've got a division office with an engineering center, that's where I work. And then we also have a distribution center that's based on the west side of town. So 3 separate facilities. But in the plant specifically, we've got about 430 associates there. And you can see the numbers up there. They're kind of daunting, especially when I reflect on them. But a couple highlights, almost half our workforce has 20 plus years of experience. So a very tenured workforce. And the other one that kind of stands out at the bottom there, a third of our workforce is within 5 years of, we'll call it qualified retirement age. A lot of folks go beyond that now, but that is a qualified retirement age. So we have some daunting workforce challenges ahead of us, and anybody in the manufacturing area here probably has some similar demographics. It's not uncommon for particularly this area and manufacturing. So that's the situation in our manufacturing plant. So let's talk a little bit about our hiring model within manufacturing. So we use a temporary to permanent hire model. We've been doing this for a long time. So we have a partnership with Manpower here locally where they do the initial screening for potential associates. After that screening is done, they become an employee of Manpower, but they actually work in the Belden facility for training. So it's basically skills and readiness. And that process can take anywhere from 6 to 9 months. Our processes are not easy to learn and do require a lot of training. So we're gauging things like skill development. Do these individuals show up on time every day? So that process takes anywhere from 6 to 9 months. And then the final step in the process is provided the associate's done a good job and is fully trained, that would be converted to a permanent hire. So we've been doing that model now for many, many years, as long as I've been at Belden for 30 years. So what happened over the last few years? So up until 2016, the model in place was basically perfectly fine. Normal attrition would be anywhere from 15, 20, 25 folks during a given calendar year, and so we could handle that with the current model. we had some changes that occurred over the last 18 to 24 months. We had work that we were bringing from another facility into the Richmond facility, and it required us to scale up about 75 individuals, so about 20% increase in our workforce size. And at the same time, we had a pretty high rate of attrition that was taking place at the same time. So as you saw the demographics earlier, we had basically a number of folks that had reached qualified retirement age and said, I'm out. So we really had a crisis situation that developed over, say, the last 12 to 18 months. And what we determined was the model wasn't working. So we had basically positions that were going unfilled for a long period of time, and we had orders basically that we couldn't hit. We were having delays in production. Normal lead time for us is 2 to 3 weeks. It was taking 5 to 6 weeks to get orders out, and just unacceptable for our customer base. So we knew we had to make some pretty drastic changes. It got to the point where the situation was bad enough where we were talking about it to our senior leadership and board of directors. And let me tell you, when you're having conversations with senior leadership and board of directors, it's never fun. They like to help, as it were, and in this particular instance, so they really did want to help, and started thinking about what do we need to do differently to change the equation. So we were really at a crossroads at this point. So being an engineer, I always have to have an engineering quote involved in any presentation I do. So we were in basically the Albert Einstein mode. We were trying to fix a problem using the same process that we'd used for 30 years. And we were expecting different results, and of course did not get them. So we really had to get creative and come up with some different solutions to the issue. So our strategy is really right now twofold. I'll talk about both of these programs today, the Workforce Training Program and our Pathways to Employment. But we know that these two alone will likely not solve the issues we have long term. So there'll probably be other programs that we develop over time, but these are ones that we have developed in conjunction with our partners up to this point. And it's really to address the workforce supply issue, which, if it weren't an issue, none of you would be here. So let's face it. So let's talk first about the Workforce Training Program. So this one is a collaboration between us, the Career Center at Richmond High School, so Rusty and team, so glad to see Rusty is here. The folks from Ivy Tech were an integral part of the development of this program, and ourselves. And really the goal out of this program is a high school student walks across the stage, gets a diploma in one hand, walks into our doors and gets a paycheck in the other hand. So we really want the graduate from high school to be workforce ready the minute that they get their diploma. So again, we'll go back to the original hiring model that we had, and we realized that is it effective for today's environment? No, it's not. And really, how do we expand the pool of potential employees? There's a certain subset that you get when you're looking at a temporary model, but we knew that wasn't going to be enough to satisfy our needs long term, and we felt it was very important to start the cycle earlier, and graduating high school students was a key part of that. So we had to change the process. So for us, again, we are a very process-driven organization and a very metric-driven organization. So if you don't like the outcome of what you're doing, it's usually not a people issue within your facility. Look at the process. So if I leave you with one other thought today, look at your processes and what can you do different than what you're doing today. So here's a high-level overview of the steps of the process itself. I'm really not going to go into a ton of detail because I know there'll be questions afterwards about some of the specifics. But it all starts, again, at the Career Center. So I will give a shout out to Rusty and team. They've done a fantastic job of screening, looking at kids basically that They've realized that 4-year college or a 2-year associate's degree may not be a path for them moving forward, but they're highly skilled. And so Rusty and team took a hard look at folks basically in their sophomore year of high school, and are there opportunities for them to learn skills such that when they graduate, they are workforce ready. So a lot of great work by the Career Center at Richmond High. So I also mentioned the Ivy Tech in this process. So the program that has been put together by Ivy Tech is fantastic. There's coursework that takes place both on site at the high school in Richmond as well as here on campus at Ivy Tech. So that's a critical part of that. The final step of the process is a fully paid internship, the second half of their senior year. And the final step is they're ready for full-time employment, again, once they receive their high school diploma. So it really is a fantastic collaboration between the partnerships that we have, and I can't say enough good things about the Ivy Tech team. Chad took this one personally on. When we had our initial discussion 2 years ago, Chad actually came to the plant, watched our current training process, and came back to the team and came up with a fantastic program for us. So I do want to give a shout out to Chad and team that there's a lot of sweat equity in this one, and we're certainly very excited about where we think this has the potential to go. So again, to drill into a little bit more detail about the actual skill and training piece of this. So within the Richmond High School and Ivy Tech partnership, what the students are learning are advanced manufacturing concepts. So you saw that as part of the workforce development piece. That's the skills that we need. Understanding the basic concepts of lean manufacturing and lean enterprise. There actually is a white belt training program that Ivy Tech has set a great model for, and it is directly applicable to our manufacturing processes. And finally, a key element for us is plastics extrusion is a very key part of our manufacturing process. So having knowledge and experience in materials and plastics processing is very important element for us in this also. And I've got some time set up for questions at the end, so I know I'm kind of sailing through this, but there'll be plenty of time for questions after we wrap up here. So the second half of their senior year is within the Belden manufacturing facility here in town, and it is a paid internship. That was a very important element, is that we want the students to be excited about the opportunity. We want them to make sure that it's a very worthwhile and fulfilling path that they're going down, so it is a paid internship. And so they're learning lean as it applies to our manufacturing process, very equipment-specific training at that point, so they're actually working on the machinery that they will work on once they are fully employed, learning about our business processes, and finally, very key for us, workplace safety. Our operations can be extremely dangerous, not only for the associates, but associates around them. So learning key safety elements is a very important part of the program. And what we found is that, as I mentioned, when we did the temporary to permanent model, that can take 6 to 9 months to do all the training that's required to be workforce ready. And this gets a jump start on that process, such that when the students graduate and hit our doors, they have gone through most of that, and so it shortens our cycle time to half or less to have an associate ready for full employment. So very excited about that piece as well. So where are we at in the program? So we launched this in the last fall, and we had basically 2 seniors at that point that said, yeah, I'd like to be a part of this. We knew it was a 2-year program, but we wanted to get a jump start on that and kind of work through some of the bugs, as it were. And it's a little easier to do that with 2 as opposed to 10 to 15. So we kind of worked through some of those issues with the first couple. And then our first full cohort of juniors that will graduate in May of next year, we've got 10 folks in that program. So very encouraged and excited about that. And here's a picture of those folks. You might notice a potential issue on this. I know the Ivy Tech team has done some great work. We actually tasked Chad to work on a time machine for us. He said he's got a prototype in process, but not quite ready for prime time. So that's actually May 2018 recognition ceremony. So if you could scratch that out on your slides, I would appreciate that. So here are two graduates and the second cohort of juniors behind them. So a quick funny story about that. So in preparing for this, you know the drill. You look at your slides, you look at them again, you look at them again. I probably looked at these 20 times. And you also spread them out to peers to have them review them. So I'm looking at this at like 9 o'clock last night, and it's like, I'm ready to go. And then it's like, May 2019, what are you thinking? And so I'm obviously perturbed at this point, and so I come in, and my wife and daughter, who are, she's getting ready to head to her freshman year, they could tell I was frustrated, and so I explained to them the situation, and they're like, you know, I get the duh dad look, and it's like, can't you just change the 9 to an 8? I'm like, yeah, honey, I've done that, you know, but I've already sent this to Ivy Tech. It's in the presentation. There's 100 copies floating around. It's not quite that simple. So then I get the, well, sucks to be you look. And so, you know, this is where the long knives come out at this point. So I, you know, of course, get defensive at that point. It's like, I've looked at these slides, you know, I can't tell you how many times. I had 3 folks peer review these, and nobody caught it. And so my wife called me, looks at me, and she's like, well, it's like, looks like you need to change your review process. I'm like, thank you, honey. And I proceeded to go to bed at that point, knowing that I couldn't do a thing about it. So again, we're very excited. We've got, again, 2 graduates and 10 in the second cohort. And again, this will not solve all our issues, but is an important element for us moving forward. And we're extremely excited about the good work that's happening at the Career Center and here at Ivy Tech to make that happen. So I'll come up for air and take any questions that you might have with regard to this specific program. Yes, sir.
So how, I'm married to a bean counter.
I was actually going to ask the question you're going to ask if no questions came up.
How did you convince the financial accountant types in your publicly traded organization to spend all this money?
Good question. So what we determined was that basically if we didn't spend money on this program, we basically had no chance of success on meeting our hiring needs. So we felt it was an investment that we had to make. Again, I think one of the creative pieces about this program is that the gift is to the foundation, and then we carve out a piece of that to fund the program. So it's a creative way, I think, to address the situation, but without the investment, we knew we basically had no way of meeting our workforce needs moving forward. So I think one of the things I do like about our company is they're very forward-looking, and they're basically, if you can justify a program or an initiative, they'll support it. And so, again, I think it's that we knew we couldn't get there without doing something creative and spending some money on the front end, is the answer. Sure.
Follow-up. Should you have started earlier?
Well, our CEO always asks that question, so.
In other words, in my observation, just in 15 minutes of your presentation,
Yep.
it had to become crisis level before the organization was willing to change.
Yeah, hindsight's always 20/20. So a lot of times crisis drives change, and in this particular instance, again, the model was fairly successful. You know, the 27 years previous to that, and so yeah, I think it took some outside eyes basically when you're working in the manufacturing environment. trying to meet the numbers on a day in, day out basis, I think it's easy to lose sight of what other possibilities are possible if you look outside the four walls of your organization. So I think it took some outside influence and eyes to really, drive the program at the end of the day.
Thank you for sharing.
Sure. Yes.
How did you get your high school career center to get involved?
So Chad basically, I think, was the instigator there. So been working with Rusty for a long period of time, and Chad, anything? And you're probably the best to answer this one.
When this situation came up, I mean, it becomes pretty clear that when you say HR met with HR and said we need this amount of folks in this age range because of the graph of their employment. So it was simple. I worked before coming to Ivy Tech. I worked at Richmond Community Schools for 16 years, so I've known Rusty for a really long time. And although we don't always agree on things, we can agree on this, which is that if we're not creative, then we have no chance. And so, to sit down, what we did is said, Doug, what do you need? Went a little bit deeper into that and said, and listened to the steps of what they needed, and then said to Rusty in the Career Center, what do your folks need? And what do the high school students need to get motivated to get into this? And so then we said, okay, here are the list of 8 things that have to happen in order for the program. And it's amazing, if you can come up with those answers that check those 8 boxes, organizations are really easy to put together. It's when we go out and say, hey, here is our product, and it checks 3 of the 8 boxes, and we get into some problems. So we developed this totally based upon what Doug said and what Rusty said.
Yeah.
As a quick follow-up to that, how did you do the recruitment in the high schools? And I'm not going to lie, when I looked at the picture, I didn't see the date. I was looking at the picture and noticing there were no females. So are we doing anything to market to the female out there? And I don't know how did those students, what was the method of getting them?
We looked at our trade programs, is where we pulled our students from. There are a few females in our trade programs. Everyone had an opportunity. They all heard the same spiel. Chad came over, representatives from Belden came over. They all had the opportunity to join if they wanted to. Some chose to, some didn't. These were the 10 that decided they wanted to be part of it. Some volunteered, voluntold type situation. But the one thing I can say the best about Belden on this deal, we've done it with A House before, is eliminating the red tape. There's a lot of red tape, and I understand how all your businesses run. You can't always eliminate that, but when you tell a 16, 17-year-old, you got to go here, you got to go here and get drug tested, you got to run up the street and do this, you got to do that, and they don't have a car to start with, makes it very difficult. And where we've had a lot of success is where some of that red tape's been able to be dropped, and they've worked with our students. So thanks to you on that, Doug, and A-House in the past. And those are some of the things that have really helped us. But students understand, and they did pay a good wage as well. So, all of our kids basically work. And, some of even our fast food are paying up to $10 an hour. So if you're not going to beat what they're already doing in a pretty nice environment, they're not real quick to want to change. Or they're out washing semis and making $12 an hour, and then the bottom line is they have to pay their bills because a lot of our students are paying a lot of their own bills themselves. So that was a thing that helped us a lot, a nice wage, and when you're done, you're instantly, those 2 young men had the opportunity as soon as they turned 18 to be hired on full time.
So before I get to you, so great question. When you look at the demographics of our workforce in the plant today, it's nearly 40% female. So we'd love to see some young high school females as part of the program because it would fit into our model within the factory itself. It just so happens that right now it happens to be young male high school students. So, yes.
Yeah, so I think also we've talked about, we actually have to go all the way, when we talk about long pipeline, right, we actually have to go all the way back to middle school to start interesting women, and then they get into Rusty's program, the Career Center, right, so we've had some of those discussions when we talk about pipeline. But I have a couple questions around I'm assuming there's a generation gap between your current employees and these young people coming in and how you manage that?
Good question. So I see it even on my team from a research and development perspective. So I think some of the soft skills, we'll call it, piece of this. There are some elements within the Ivy Tech program that helps address some of that as well. But it's not easy, I'll tell you that. And so I think it's about finding those areas of common ground that you can communicate with this next generation of associates, and they want to be successful at the end of the day. And so, but there's no great one answer to that question other than communicate early and often to those individuals and show them what that path looks like moving forward of what they can achieve if they're an individual that really has no interest in attending secondary education.
So, and do your supervisors get any training on how to do that repeated communication that's a little bit more necessary with the...
They do. Our HR team within the plant has worked pretty hard on trying to make sure that we're staying in tune with sort of the different needs of this following generation. So there is some amount of training that takes place with our HR and supervisorial team as well. Yeah.
So the first year you had 2 students in your classroom, and this next year you're going to have 10.
Yes.
Are you guaranteeing them a position, or how does that work? Do you have a cap on class size?
We are guaranteeing them a position, and really it's the demographics of the workforce allow us to make that commitment. And we'll talk about the same thing in the next program also. We've got enough openings at this point that we're not reaching the cap, basically, where we have more candidates than we have positions available. Could it get to that point? Yeah, that's possible. And I think as we talk about both of these programs, that's where we're kind of looking outward to, are there other partnerships or other employers in the area where if we have more supply than our capacity to handle, are there other areas that we can turn to for those potential associates?
One thing I would mention about this is that there's a lot of foresight to hire an intern coach. So we have a coach from Belden that shepherds those individuals so that they can be liaison between the Career Center and Belden, because as we all know, we all have our own language and our own process, and trying to navigate that as a high school student is really tough. And so that intern coach, I think, is the reason that the 2 were successful, and I think that we've gotten a good response from the younger folks.
Yeah, very good point, Chad, and I think it is critical. Yes.
The 2 seniors stayed with Belden, and what is your expected retention rate with these 10? I mean, what do you expect?
So, good question. Just this last week, we actually had one of the 2 elected. His dad owns a family business, and he's elected to go join the family business as opposed to us. But the other has stayed with us, and again, I think because we kind of started the program halfway, we knew that there was some risk of some possible attrition, and that's really why we're trying to drive higher numbers in the junior class, because we do expect, it's like any other process, you're going to have some fallout of that. So to the piece of guaranteeing jobs when they're done, we understand that things happen, situations change, we're going to have some fallout out of the process. So right now we're batting 500, be pretty good in baseball, but not certainly where we'd like to be long term with the program.
And to back up what Chad said on hiring the coach, it was a retired person from Belden, knew the lingo. It was a home run.
Yeah, so it was one of our former, he'd worked in the training department before, was very skilled in the training area, but also able to establish great relationships with the earlier career folks. So as Chad mentioned, that's a key element if you want to try something similar to this, is having that bridge between a high schooler and full-time employment, I think, is a critical element to the process.
Dollars-wise, how much money do you think that you spent in their training retention, requiring them to sign a term to work with you with the money that they're, I mean, that's free education. And that's just because I work with a lot of different programs in my community, and we often require a 2-year contract, a 1-year contract to work for us for the training dollars that we spend. So just was curious.
So right now, we're not requiring basically any obligation on behalf of the of folks in the program. We may consider that, I think, as part of kind of kicking this off. We felt it was important on the front end to not have a lot of strings attached to it, other than a very competitive and above competitive wage out there. We thought that would be a sticky enough piece to this. But looking forward, as hopefully the numbers start to increase, that may be something we have to consider to help retention. So right now it's not part of that. In terms of the cost, I mean, we're just looking at it as a long-term investment at this point. And again, we knew our current model wasn't cutting the mustard, and we had to look at something different. So it's an investment we're willing to make right now.
One thing too, we got to remember, these kids are 16. I mean, maybe you knew what you were going to do at 16. I thought I was going to be a farmer instead of grandpa, so my path changed drastically. So to tell a 16-year-old he's going to sign a contract and so he can go to work, probably, A, if I'm mom and dad, I'm not going to allow him to sign that contract, and B, they're going to change their minds. I mean, the young man that did change his mind, I haven't found him yet, but we'll have a nice conversation. I wasn't real happy when I got that email last week either, but they are 16 years old. As we've seen with the adults in our community, they move around. That it's really difficult for a 16, 17-year-old to make that decision. They're going to go in and work at the same place for the next 35 years.
So, and the other element of this is, at the end of the day, if we were stuck with our current process, these are 10, 12 individuals that 2 years ago we never would have come across them, never would have touched them. So this is all upside in our minds as we look forward, and again, why we're fully committed to this looking forward. Yeah.
Is part of the process or this training to have them sit down with an HR person and go over like retirement plans and what that looks like at Belden, or tuition benefits, things like that?
Yeah. So they get exposure to kind of the whole benefits package as part of that. So you're right, that's a key element, is not only understanding what the paycheck's going to look like in 2 weeks, but how do you prepare for eventually retirement also, and what that benefit package looks like. So yes, that is a key part of it. Good question.
I really like the idea of this program, but part of making a program successful is having that continued pipeline and things. And one of the struggles that I think a lot of manufacturers are facing are that perception and getting kids interested in manufacturing. Is there anything being done at the high school level, whether it be Richmond High School, or I don't know if there's any other representatives, to recruit these students internally to participate in the career tech program, to at least explore it? Like you said, they don't know what they want to do. They don't know. So is there anything to encourage more people to at least participate?
Well, for all the students that feed into the Richmond Area Career Center, which would be Northeastern, Randolph Southern, and Richmond High School, all 8th graders come through. They tour our building to get an overlook of what we have. We've worked on Manufacturing Matters Day, taking students out to different companies here in town so they can see that maybe it's not what Grandpa did 50 years ago. So it's an ongoing process to try to make sure they understand what it's really like out there. And then we also have that talk about the cost of college and what do you really want to do when you're done.
I'm from Connorsville, Whitewater Career Center, and we do the same thing. We have 8th graders come through our facility. It's really difficult to do that in the program area as an instructor, but it's a necessary piece for the future. And there is all kinds of opportunities for these kids at every level, from 8th grade all the way up to graduation, and we're really exposing them to that to bring them in. The most important piece that we believe is getting the high schools and the high school counselors on board to show them that these kids have a path. Not just a path into the workforce, but a true career path. So from a industry perspective, going into your high schools in your area, talking to your principals, talking to your guidance counselors, showing them what your company has to offer would be a huge benefit to both the Career Center locally and then to the business in general once they graduate high school.
Great point.
Again, since this is kind of a discussion, this is not to take anything away from the teenagers, but looking at your demographics, and I know what mine are in my plant, you got half your workforce turning 60, and half of them have 30 years of tenure. So how do we reach the next wave of 30-year-olds that are going to work 30 years?
I wish I had an answer for you on that one.
I mean, they're not going to work 30 years. This generation, if you look at the research that's coming out, they're not lifetime employees. You're going to have them for a few years, they're going to move on. So really, something like this is going to be very beneficial to manufacturing because this is the constant turnover that we are all going to have to deal with because people are not staying for 30 years with one company.
We even see it in education. I mean, you know, for the first, I've been around a little while, and I'm in year 28 or whatever, and you know, the first 15 years, it's the same faces every day, no matter what school I was working in. And then probably in the last 4 years, we've probably seen 40% turnover at Richmond High School. And it's not so much retirement, some of that's retirement, but it's just changed. I mean, we'll have, we start school 3 weeks from yesterday, and it won't shock me if somebody calls in next week and says, hey, decide I'm moving to Fort Wayne. I mean, it's just, you're totally right about that. It's just a different, Jim, it makes me feel old because I'm saying it that way, but the bottom line is that is the reality. You know, when we've been trying to hire coaches here in town, everybody always says, well, we need somebody that's going to stay for 20 years. Well, that does sound great, but if we can find a great one for 3, let's roll with that and figure out what we're going to do 3 years later, because it's just a lot more difficult to do anywhere, and especially since we're not sitting in Indianapolis as well.
Okay, well, great dialogue, great questions. I will switch gears, and we've talked a lot about pathways, so let's talk about another Pathways to Employment program here.